أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم به نستعين الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. A quick recap of the points from yesterday. First point was that we are quite blessed to be able to attend the Azaa of Aba Abdullah, and this shukr, if it has to be real, it has to stem from something that's actually real. It can't just be the idea of things. It's very easy to uh, fall prey to the idea of thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when someone says, wait a second, where is this stemming from? We aren't able to open it up and see it within our life. So the actuality is that these azah and the majalis that we enter, every year if there's a development and a change happening within us, if we have tawajjuh that actually this change is coming from the azah of Abdullah himself, this particular change, this specific change, not an idea of change, but the actual change. When we're able to link it back to the azah of Abdullah, then we recognize the importance of this particular gathering. This is only possible if we are attentive and we are linking the concepts that we learn in the month of Muharram and Safar to ourselves and are able to kind of track that throughout the year. Otherwise, if the month of Muharram and the month of Safar and the concepts we talk about, or the concepts we even preach, even for myself, if they have no actual impact on my life outside of these 2 months, then it becomes very difficult for me to have actualized that shukr. I have the general idea of shukr, but then it's not linked to an actual development of mind. You see that? In this way, this type of a shukr is a more experiential shukr. It's not one of just theory. Second thing we talked about was the idea of control. We said, well, control is something quite unique. It stems from three things. It's linked with three things: ilm, hilm, and silm. Okay, we gave three different stories in history how these traits, ilm, hilm, and silm, impacted the various types of controls. Okay, and we linked them to the family system. We said, well, yesterday's topic was about the family system in terms of the child to parent relationship. I said relationships are direction specific. So the child to parent relationship is different than the parent to child relationship. Okay? So in this particular case, we talked about all the times when the child is asking for some sort of control. We talked about different phases. For example, in the toddler phase, they want to hold their own food and eat their own food, right? That is a demand of control from the parents. In another phase, they want some level of independence and so on and so forth. These signs of demand from the child are placed there by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show us where the child is developing, okay, to appropriately assist in that development. Allah hasn't given us a project called child tarbiyah and left us on our own without any instruction manuals. And the instruction manual doesn't come in the form of some sort of a big lengthy book. It comes part and parcel with each child, because the instructions for raising each child is specific to that child. You see that? So when you have a child coming out and demanding certain types of controls at different phases of their life, we talked from the toddler phase all the way to the adult phase. We gave 4 or 5 examples yesterday. At each phase, it's actually an indication from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the parents that your child is developing in this area right now. So hence right now is the time for you to use your intellect and properly assist your child in developing in that area. You see, if the child is developing in this area and I'm providing assistance in developing that side, that's not very accurate and that's not very beneficial to the child. You see that? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows for this interaction through this control, because you can't ignore the control variable, right? It's something that if the parent wanted to turn off, they would turn off. But they simply can't. That's a good indicator that in Takween, in the system of existence, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed it as a tool for assistance You can't turn it off even if you wanted to. Today we're talking about two very specific relationships. We're talking about the husband to wife relationship and the wife to husband relationship. These two relationships also have aspects of control in it. This three-part series was talking about helping control issues in the household through understanding the azab of Abdullah himself. Salawat, please. When you have the husband-wife relationship, you understand that there is, it'll record. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed certain phases in the development of the nafs. As a person grows, there are certain things they overcome, and there are certain things they overcome, and so on and so forth. There's a very unique time and there's a very unique mechanism that Allah uses to boost the development of the nafs. Okay, this institution and this mechanism is called marriage. You see, the Holy Prophet, if his ultimate goal was to guide humanity towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, he wouldn't have placed such a huge emphasis on this institution if it was not intimately linked with development of man. We have in both Shia ahadiths and Sunni texts a plethora of hadiths that talk about the idea of an-nikah sunnati. One who does not form a union and get married is not from us at that level. Meaning what? If our ultimate purpose, us as the hadiths, the guides, if our ultimate purpose, the anbiya, the awliya, the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, was to take you towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the highest of the anbiya says that if you don't do this one item, you're not from us, that means what? That item is very closely linked to their ultimate purpose. And that was to take us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this taking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not physical, it's not like a boat ride and so on and so forth, right? It's one of tawajjuh. It's what in a relationship, if you have proximity between two individuals, if I am the best friend of this person, that doesn't mean that that person is my best friend as well, correct? So in terms of relationships, they're direction specific. How close is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to his creatures? Well, he's the closest possible for me, for this camera recording, for this farsh, for the Holy Prophet, and for Yazid. It's not the case that Allah is more closer for Yazid and less close for the Holy Prophet. No, in terms of the direction between Allah and his creatures, he is absolutely close. Where he says in the Holy Quran, I'm closer to you than your jugular vein. And this is not meant as a sign only for humans, right? There, the wording jugular vein is a kinaya. It means that your very existence in of itself, the thing that you associate your being to, I'm closer to you than that. Okay? You, all creatures. But in the relationship between the creatures towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that proximity and that closeness is now unique. This phone, myself, the Holy Prophet, and Yazid are all differently proximate to Allah. So that criteria for proximity, that criteria for qurb is what? It's no different than the criteria that me and you have in our friendships. Imagine you had a friend and you gave them lots of wealth, lots of money, and so on and so forth, but you didn't give them tawajjuh. Okay? Would you be close to that particular person? No. Right? You're giving them all of your associates, but you're not giving them the I. You see that? You're saying you can use my car, you can use my house, you can use my money, but I am separate from you. My tawajjuh is somewhere else. That person will feel, okay, great, you're giving me all these toys and these things, but really you're not close to me. You see that? It's more evident in a husband-wife relationship too. Husband comes home and tells the wife, look, you can have my house, you can have my car, I'll provide you this associate of mine and that associate of mine, but I won't provide you the I. My attention, we focus on somewhere else. You can have all the mice that you want. That spouse might come back and say, well, I don't want the mice. I want the I. Which historical story reminds us of this? Abu Abdullah approaches two individuals uh, on his way towards Karbala. He approaches somebody, uh, Abdul Rahman. He approaches an individual who's a tribe leader by the name of Abdul Rahman along his way towards Kufa. And he says to him that, uh, uh, it's Abdul Rahman ibn Yazid. He says to him that, if I'm not mistaken, he says that, I'm going towards Kufa, I want you to accompany me. And he says, Abu Abdullah, I agree with you, I like your message, and I like you that you are the son of the Holy Prophet. I will give you my best sword and I'll give you my best horse, but I won't give you myself. Abu Abdullah rejects both his horse and his sword, right? And to this date, we say la'nat to the person who didn't give himself to Abu Abdullah. That person is not away from our land because he didn't assist when his Imam came knocking to him, correct? There's another individual that Abu Abdullah approaches in almost, if you look at the history, an identical way. Okay? This individual, when Abu Abdullah approaches him, Zuhair. When Abu Abdullah approaches him, you see, he was from the Usmani Maslak before. He was known as Zuhair al-Usmani, not Alawi. He was somebody who actually supported the third caliph very strongly. When there was after the second caliph, when there was a difference between choosing the path of Imam Ali or choosing the path of the third caliph, this person was somebody who was a staunch supporter of Uthman, to the point where he became ma'ruf as Zuhair Uthmani. Abdullah approaches this individual, and in a very similar manner to the way he approached that other person, he says to him that I'm going to Kufa and I want you to accompany me. Okay. Look over here what happens. This particular person disassociates all of his mice. He gives his wealth to his brothers. He tells his wife that you're free from me, you don't have to accompany me if you want. He lets his entire caravan and all his stuff go. He says, you can take it back, basically, it's your stuff. And he gives the eye to Abu Abdullah. He says, my tawajjuh is entirely with you now. And joins the camp of Abu Abdullah. And to this day, forget us. Our Imam himself says, Bi abi anta wa ummi to him in different ziyarat. See that? Salawat, please. So, when it comes to proximity and closeness, the criteria is not the associates. The criteria is where the tawajjuh lies. And the tawajjuh is an intimate representative of the eye, where the eye is focused. Okay? So between the husband-wife relationship and the wife-husband relationship, right, there is control issues which take place. And these control issues typically stem from those same three things: ilm, hilm, and sin. Okay. There are times when one spouse, so in this particular case, the husband, says that I have more ilm regarding this particular thing, and therefore the control regarding that scenario should be mine too. I have more ilm and the control should be mine. And it creates now in the household a situation where he says, because I have more ilm, therefore you, wife, should be now doing that which I want to do. So demand control. You see that? In the same way with his children, in the same way with aspects of his house, and so on and so forth. We saw in history the example of ilm. Salawat, please. We saw in history the example of ilm in the journeying of Imam Hussein alayhi salam towards Kufa. As he's leaving Medina, a certain individual by the name of Muhammad Hanafiya comes to him and tries to take control of the direction of Abu Abdullah. He says to Abu Abdullah, if you were to listen to me, don't go there. You don't understand. If you stay in Medina, it's a lot safer for you. It's your fortress. The Banu Hashim are here for you. He starts listing to Abu Abdullah, and we have in detail the things he lists, of all the reasons why he thinks that staying in Medina is the best of choices for Abu Abdullah. Then he lists another list, all the reasons why going to Kufa is actually a bad thing. He doesn't stop at the list, he goes further. He says, if you were to ask me and I advise you to do this, stay here, for example. You see that? When is he doing it? When Abu Abdullah has prepared the caravan and they're about to leave Medina. Meaning that there's a situation that's happening, and now he wants to direct control towards the direction of that caravan based off of what? Based off of hearsay? No, based off of ilm. You see that? We learn from that same interaction that Abu Abdullah approaches that particular person, doesn't say, go away. He says, okay, let me hear what you have to say. And that's why we have those two lists now, and so on and so forth. We learn from that even if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given mandated authority to the level of imamat, even then there's a mechanism and a method of kind of working with others who are coming to try and take that control on the basis of love, on the basis of care. You see that? There's another person who tries to take control as well. Marwan at that time also tries to take control of the journey of Abu Abdullah. Abu Abdullah, when he has a meeting with Marwan and Walid, Abu Abdullah says, I will respond to your request of Bay'at to Yazid the next day. And that same night, Abu Abdullah goes. In that meeting, Marwan says, I won't let you go. And if need be, I will end your life. Over there, Abu Abdullah says that these words are too big for your mouth. And over there, Abu Abdullah doesn't say, okay, give me your reasoning. The interaction there is a very harsh one. You see that? This principle that we have in the Holy Quran of ruhama bainahum wa ashadda'u ala al-kuffar isn't something that's limited to the verses, it applies everywhere. When it comes to relationships that are formed on the basis of love and the deen, that's exactly what a husband and wife relationship is. It is becoming official by the deen. If they take the deen out of it, it is no longer a legitimate relationship. It's a haram relationship, correct? And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself says that when this relationship is formed, at the forming of it, I give love. You see that? So this particular relationship is the exact place where that ruling applies perfectly. Okay? So when there is a request for control, either stemming from ilm, and I'll go further into hilm and silm as well. The individual who's trying to direct and who's trying to manage, right, the husband to the wife relationship. So now Allah has granted the husband certain level of authority in the house. If he's trying to manage his house, he has to have the capacity to work amicably with the others within the household. He has to. If the other person comes and says that here's my ilm regarding why the decision that you're making is incorrect, just like Abu Abdullah in that particular instance with Muhammad ibn Hanafiya, gave him the chance to speak and then rebutted him with what? Ilm as well. Provided reasoning for him. Okay? This husband also has to now create that particular relationship in his household with his wife. Abu Abdullah goes one step further. I mentioned this yesterday as well. He tells Muhammad ibn Hanafiya, you stay in Medina and be an ayn for me, an eye for me. Give me updates on what's happening in Medina. You see, very quickly, Muhammad ibn Hanafiya came in to try to direct the caravan away from Kufa. Abu Abdullah not only appropriately interacted with him, but also, if he couldn't take him and make him part of his caravan in terms of the physical journey, made him part of the caravan at some level. You see that? This management style is very unique and very important to understand. Abu Abdullah doesn't do that with Marwan and doesn't do that with Walid at all, because neither the deen is unifying them nor there is a relationship of love. Salawat, please. In terms of deviation now, there is, whenever there's a fitri reality, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He was to grant you some sort of a reward or adhab based off of that, He has to allow for you to somehow actualize a balance there. Okay? Otherwise, if He's given you the capacity to lift 50 kilograms, right, and He's lifting it for you, okay, then you are not the one that's actually developing, and hence you are not becoming the individual who deserves or becomes heaven. Deserves is the commonly understood way, but the reality is we actually become heaven. It's not the case that we go to heaven and that heaven basically is the thing that is the gold medal and the reward and so on and so forth. Rather, in our ahadith, it says that heaven is waiting for these mu'mineen with open arms, as if the mu'mineen grant heaven its beauty. The mu'mineen are the ones that are actually the real niceness. The heaven is simply honored to have them there. You see that? You yourself become the essence of heaven. Hellfire works the same way. Okay? You become the very heat of hellfire. The hellfire which is heated by the bones and the bodies of who? Of men and jinn, basically. Meaning what? You become the heat itself. Anyways, in this relationship, whenever there's a fitri item given, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to give you now the capacity to control that and manage that. How do they do that? There's an internal push for deviation and there's an external push for deviation. We have a hadith that says, shaitan flows like blood flows in the body. Okay? The blood has very specific areas in the body that it flows, correct? But if you nick that area and blood flows in a manner that is not controlled, that same amount of blood in the same body, just 1 centimeter outside of, for example, that normal pathway, can lead to something called internal bleeding and cause a lot of damage, correct? Okay, so shaitan flows in existence like blood flows in the human body. This hadith we have from the Holy Prophet and other Ma'asumin as well. In that sense that whenever you have this fitri capacity, shaitan is there at all levels to try and make it unbalanced. Okay, at every instance. If you give into that and you let him make it unbalanced, it's like causing that internal bleeding. See that? But when you overcome it and you control it, right, and you channel it, right, you let it be in its own place and let it kind of help you understand where to grow, where you have a weakness, and hence you give more tawajjuh to that particular thing. All of a sudden, that blood is in an appropriate place of the body flowing and keeps the body alive, keeps the body developing. So when it comes to control issues from the wife's side towards the husband, he has to understand there is an internal deviate and an external deviate. He has to look at which deviate is doing what. Sometimes, internally speaking, he has some sensitivities. Okay? And those sensitivities lead him to inappropriately interact with the spouse. Instead of how Abu Abdullah interacted, listening to reasoning, and then letting the other partner come as far as they could at their own capacity. Okay, you can't come, you have a leg issue and so on and so forth, but you can stay as my representative in Medina, I'll let you do that, for example. You see that? This concept is called mudara'a, by the way. So, instead of doing that, if a husband is seeing that he is doing something completely different, he has to recognize that this is the place for his own personal development. Allah has placed that other spouse in front of him, his wife, with the control issue happening, and his weakness regarding affecting that particular control issue, dealing with that particular control issue, shows exactly where this husband hasn't developed yet. Okay. So in our daily life, when the hardships are there, one aspect the hardship is the development of the spouse, true, the other person. But a bigger aspect of that is the development of me. What irked me here? And why did it irk me? Okay. In the world of counseling psychology, if you look at how advice is given, okay, one very fundamental thing is this, that you look at every phenomenon of a hardship in multiple layers. Okay, the external layer in of itself needs to be addressed and managed appropriately. That's a separate issue. But the internal layer can't be ignored. This riled you up. This caused a big, this caused a big storm within you. See that? What was the reason why the storm was created? Is there a sensitivity that needs to be addressed? Is there an attachment to one of your associates that needs to be fixed? Are you submitting to something other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala within yourself? Your position, your X, your Y, your Z, and so on and so forth. You see that? A bigger fix than the external lies in the internal. If you fix the external and the other person fixes their issue, but you neglect the internal, have you succeeded? Absolutely not. You've made sure they go to heaven. You see that? Well, you might have been going to hell. You see that? But if you focus on the internal issue, that in of itself leads you to focus on the external. Because my wife, my relationship, one of my associates, you see that? So the focus in development has to be one which starts off from the inner self, the internal self. Salawat, please. The second relationship is the relationship between the wife and the husband. It's a very different relationship. The first one was between and I looked when I was talking to the husband, I was looking over here, and the next portion I was looking a little bit over here. But the relationship principles apply to both. What I was teaching over here applies to the sisters too in a different light, and what I'll be talking about here will apply to them too in a different light. In the wife and husband relationships, okay, there is a unique hadith that exists, and this hadith is often misunderstood, bashed, put aside, unfortunately. There's a hadith from the Holy Prophet which says that if sajda was supposed to be done to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I would have made women do sajda to their husbands. Okay? If you search online this hadith, you will see a war going on. Okay? Because they simply didn't understand what's going on. See, look at the other ahadiths of the Holy Prophet as well. It's the same person saying these ahadiths. He says, let me drink water before someone comes and attacks. The same Holy Prophet also said that my brother Jibreel talked so highly of women and the relationship of women to their husbands that I almost felt as if saying uff to them was not allowed. Okay? Another hadith of the Holy Prophet. We also have the verse of the Holy Quran which says, the one who's the best of you is the one who has the most taqwa. Correct? Thank you so much. The one who has most taqwa. So we have all these various ahadiths that are present. Understanding the deen by taking one hadith and running with it without understanding where it fits, how it fits, why it was said, is very detrimental, because you could be fighting a fight that doesn't need to be fought. You see that? What story comes to mind when we think of two people or two entities doing sajda, one to the other. Story of shaitan comes to mind, correct? That shaitan was told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do sajda to Adam alayhi salam. There's a very unique parable being built between the story of shaitan and the relationship between husband and wife. But let's look at that parable today. Salawat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates shaitan, and shaitan does ibadah for 5,000 years. Shaitan is a very intricate existence, not a very simple existence. Okay? To the point where this particular person goes all the way to the levels of the malaika. Okay? He's able to witness them. Malaika aren't up there, they're even here. Right? But what it means that he started living with them is that he transcended and went beyond just the physical bounds. Okay? That he became, his existence became expansive enough that he was able to interact with even the malaika. That he was doing something right. Okay? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates then Adam out of clay, it says over there, of a very limited material thing. Okay? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to shaitan, do sajda now to Adam. And shaitan comes to Allah and says, you made me from fire and you made him from clay. Now fire meaning what? You made me someone who's not bound by the material realm. You made me somebody who was able to reach the proximation to even your closest angels. Okay? I am a latif creation. I am a creation that's not bound by the material realm. And you made him as a creature who is bound to the material realm. He can't go 6 hours without food. Okay? So he presents this argument before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in defiance of what? Of doing sajda. This argument is one of ilm. Correct? Allah is telling him, opposing control over shaitan, saying, you're my creature, do sajda to Adam. Correct? Just like Abdullah was going in the caravan, and then Muhammad ibn Hanafiya comes and says, I have a reason why you shouldn't do this. You see that? Over here too, shaitan comes and I have a reason. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him a chance. Says, wait a second, you might be a Muhammad ibn Hanafiya. I might be able to give you a chance here. You might not be a Marwan team person. Allah asks him a question. Right? In the Holy Quran, this hadith, this verse is found in 2 places. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks him a question. He says, are you being prideful? That question in of itself, because Allah could have said, you are being prideful as a statement and then pushed him out. Right? When you ask somebody a question in that particular way, you're waking them up. You're saying, don't double down on your problem, huh? You're waking them up. You see that? I'm giving you another chance, huh? You can backtrack and go back and do that which was requested of you. Shaitan doubles down. Okay? He doesn't do sajda over there. And then that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes him one of the rajim, the people who are the lowest of the low. Forget the material realm, he became lower than that too. Now let's look at a hypothetical scenario. Had shaitan done sajda to Adam without Allah commanding, where would shaitan be? Again, rajim. Correct? If Allah didn't command him to do sajda, shaitan said, oh, this is a cool thing, it's a clay person thing, let me just do sajda to him. He would still find himself in hellfire. Okay? When that command and that connection, that tawajjuh is taken away, and the shaitan within us gets occupied by the appearance of an Adam, right? It's very easy to deviate. Over there, not listening and listening, not being nice and being nice could both land you into hellfire. If you have a relationship, and this applies to the brothers too in their relationships, right, too? But I'm using this example particularly because the Holy Prophet used this connection for the women to men relationship. If you have that shaitan do a good thing, i.e. sajda, or a bad thing, i.e. try to trick him and deviate him and curse him, both of those things land him into hellfire if he's not attentive towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. See that? Hazrat Adam was still a live being, right? Allah gives humans a bigger test than that. He says, I have a bunch of rocks in a city called Makkah. They're not even live. I want you to do sajda to them. Okay? If anybody does sajda to those rocks called the Kaaba without the command of Allah, is that the same as idol worshipping? Absolutely yes. Lands you in hellfire. Okay? If someone says, independent of God, I'm still going to pray this, forget what God said, na'udzubillah, I'm going to pray, which means Qibla, I'm going to pray towards the Kaaba. That 2 rakah salah will land him right beside shaitan in hellfire. Why? Because he has done an act without being commanded for it. He has done a submission to rocks. But when he looks at that particular direction and he says, it doesn't matter if it's rocks or Adam or anything. The commanded is not important, the commander is important. Okay? Then all of a sudden that particular action becomes a worshipper. Okay? The same way shaitan went to hellfire, he got occupied in the Adam, not the commander. He got occupied in the weaknesses of Adam. What were the weaknesses of Adam? Adam was made out of clay. He was somebody who was materially attached. He was low. In terms of expansiveness, I had done sajda for 5,000 years. Allah, this guy just became born. Okay? He's a toddler before me. Shaitan became occupied in the weaknesses of Adam and forgot the strength of the commander. And in that sense, shaitan fell. The way he comes to each gender is specific. The way he comes to women in their roles as wives is something very accurate to that same way that he fell. He wants to make you occupied in the deficiencies of your spouse and use those to negate the commands of the commander. The pattern is exact, and that's why the Holy Prophet uses this as a parable. It's not a means of put down. When you see online there's a war happening, oh, how could be shaitan, or how could sajda happen, X, Y, Z. The Prophet is not after any individual doing sajda to anyone but Allah. He is using this parable to teach and to guide and to wake us up. Salawat, please. Does that mean that the weaknesses should not be overcome in the spouse? No, of course not. Spouse has weakness, husband has weaknesses. Those weaknesses need to be overcome. He's not very aware when he makes decisions. He is on his phone all the time, X, Y, Z. Those are things that need to be fixed. It's true. Hazrat Adam himself, from the very material life, had led a lifetime in this dunya, right, where he grew himself and his kids, to the point where now that human, from the state of the lowest of low creatures, was now able to reach the highest of high creatures, right? The only reason why humans are valuable is because they started off very low, right? And now if they grow, that growth has meaning. You see that? Okay. So the weaknesses have to be overcome. But we can't let the weaknesses of the other person create weaknesses in us. That's important. What time is it? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
6 minutes left to 12.
Okay. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala. So, in the husband-wife relationship and the wife-husband relationship, we have to understand that uh, shaitan is at play, uh, and it's not the case that he's come against God. Shaitan can't oppose God. He's come to oppose us. Okay. So when we are looking at this scenario, my relationship to my spouse, I am the manager of that, whether I'm the husband or I'm the wife. Okay. The wife is responsible. She's the manager in what? In her associate. What's her associate? My relationship to my husband. The husband is the manager in what? In his relationship to his wife. You see that? When we go to our graves, or even in this dunya, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't do hisab of us regarding someone else's relationship. He doesn't say, okay, what is that brother's relationship to you? I don't understand. The question that could be asked though is, what's your relationship to him like? You see that? And shaitan, one of the ways he comes to dupe us is to make the relationships lose direction. It doesn't matter which direction is what. They're one entity. And that's why it uses the weaknesses of one area to damage the other. You see that? When you lose the direction component from a relationship and both become the same thing, then all of a sudden tit for tat can happen. Well, because he's weak here and there, it justifies me screaming and yelling here. Does it? In our deen, as Allah says, I will not punish you for yelling and screaming and doing bad things if somebody else was doing bad too. A swear word is a swear word, correct? Fosh is fosh. Disrespect is disrespect. Anywhere in the deen or the aql it says that if the other person is disrespectful to you, go ahead, be disrespectful to them too. In the relationship of rahmah. Yeah, ashidda al-kuffar has that in it. We have a hadith that throw the stone back from where it came from. That's not towards relationships of family. That's not within the deen and love. These hadiths are talking about two very different paradigms. The Quran mentions it very simply. Ashidda'u alal kuffar wa ruhama bainahum. You see that? In the family relationships, ruhama bainahum is present. Raham means what? It means mercy. Mercy means what? Overcoming the weaknesses of another. Imagine you go to a judge and you have a life sentence and you say, have mercy, judge. The judge says, I have a lot of mercy, but still life sentence. Then what type of mercy is this? You go to the street and there's a beggar asks, have mercy. And you say, I have a lot of mercy, and you clap his hand and walk away. He's going to say, what's wrong with you? Mercy means I have a deficiency, help overcome it. You see that? Ruhama bainahum means that, look, bainahum, between you, by the fact that you are you're multiple, there'll be an up and down and high and low of ilm, hilm, and still happening. Okay? Amongst you, learn to live with one another. Salawat, please. We see this most prevalent in the life of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. You see, we have two sets of ahadith. Both of them start off with this. ارتد الناس بعد إلا الثلاث. The first set of hadith talks about the Holy Prophet. ارتد الناس بعد النبي إلا الثلاث. That after the Holy Prophet, all of Muslim Ummah, all of mankind became murtad. Not the fiqhi murtad, different type of murtad. Became murtad. Except for 3 individuals. The same hadith is quoted from Imam Hussein too. ارتد الناس بعد الحسين إلا الثلاث. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, at the start of his imamah, was working with how many Shias outside of his family? How many Shias? Okay. These three individuals were those people who hadn't given up on the idea of Allah's system coming and ruling over the world still. Okay. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam was able to appropriately take control of the situation. And I told you guys yesterday in the historical analysis that Yazid's army took the caravan and paraded that caravan throughout the Muslim lands to show their control over the Muslim lands, correct? And through that very journey, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam appropriately managed those around him and his own speech and flipped the table. He used the very same route to show the world that the control is still with us. He retook the control to the point where Yazid wasn't a nice guy. He had to let the Ahlul Bayt go within a few months or within 2 years, depending on the different riwayat. Okay. That very Imam Sajjad wasn't allowed to go to a different city, right? He couldn't be like, hey, caravan, you wait here, I'm going to go. No, he was bound to that caravan. He used that very situation that the apparent world had bound him to, the shaitan of his time had bound him to. Okay? And he used that to flip the tables. You see that? In the same way where we ourselves in our own life, the very hardships that we personally have, our appropriate interactions to those can flip the tables. Take the control away from ghairullah and give it to Allah. Okay? Imam Sajjad does this after Karbala. He has 3 individuals that he's working with. Okay? And he appropriately works with them and interacts with them to the point where Imam Baqir now, after Imam Sajjad has how many students? 4,000 students. Okay. Sometimes that's quoted, the other part isn't quoted. Even then, it wasn't like the Shias were the larger of the group. Abu Hanifa had 20,000 students for them. But from 3 individuals going to the idea of 4,000 individuals willing to learn now is immense. Of those 4,000, did the Imam have even 18 or 20 individuals who were like Abul Hasan al-Kabuli, for example? No. Because if he had those, then he would have revolted. But the Imam didn't shun those who were of a lower intensity. You see that? He kept developing them. To the point where Imam Sadiq alayhi salam's time comes, right? And Imam Sadiq, when someone came to debate him, he'd say, debate this student of mine. If you beat him, it's as if you've beaten me. Do you know how great of a term that is for Imam of the time to use for one of his students? Not for 1 or 2. Individuals would come to debate the Imam. Imam would have his companion. He said, you want to debate in Kalam? And go here, Yunus. You debate him and you beat him, it's as if you've beaten me. So, appropriately interacting with something that seemed on the Zahir very bleak. 3 individuals left. Right? The appropriate interaction can give fruition to that situation. But within 2 generations, the tables flipped. Salawat, please. But maintaining control in the hands of Allah means to have patience. This is another lesson that we learn from Abu Abdullah and Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. You see, throughout the journey, there were times, there's narrations that say that the condition of Imam Sajjad was so weak and it was so difficult for him that his color would be changing. Okay. You see, for an Imam of the time who has done absolutely nothing wrong, and Taze, even in the interaction he's had with his own enemies, he's tried nothing but to guide them and fix their mistakes. His main purpose is that he doesn't have personal animosity towards the other. He doesn't hold grudges that are not the grudges of Allah. Okay? So such a pure individual, when they see a animosity and a negativity towards them, they have patience. They have sabr. The most difficult of scenarios and situations was to now manage non-ma'sooms, kids, women folk, that in the highest level of difficulty, this caravan of Abu Abdullah goes through, and we don't see anything from them except the adab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To managing that, making sure that that is established in the most difficult of times, this is the miracle of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. We had the family of the companions with Abu Abdullah as well, correct? These families of the companions weren't people who were raised in the household of Sayyidah Fatima Zahra salamullah alayha. We had the wives of some of the companions there in the caravan too, correct? These wives were not the wives who were raised in the household of Imam Ali alayhi salam. They weren't. And they had faced some of the most difficult tragedies. Yet maintaining that adab and maintaining that sabr throughout the journey was the miracle of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. This required sabr, an unimaginable level of sabr. Because there was provocation upon provocation. There was slander upon slander. When the caravan of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam approaches Sham, if you could dim the lights, that'd be perfect. When the caravan of Abu Abdullah approaches Sham, you see, one of the biggest zulm that Muawiyah had done was he had fooled the people of Sham into thinking that the Banu Umayyads are the rightly connected individuals to the Prophet. To the point where these individuals in Sham, to cheer and they were reciting the verses of the Holy Quran. They were reciting ayat of the Holy Quran, thinking that they have become victorious over some sort of a deviant group. Imam Sajjad, when he enters that particular gathering, he starts to speak about who he is. We see many ahadiths and many speeches where they talk about how they're linked to the Holy Prophet. Ana ibn Ali al-Mukhtar. Imam Sajjad is waking the people up even in that situation. And the immense amount of tribulation that Yazid and his side is given to the Imam is unimaginable. They gather, the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, in a gathering where they're serving alcohol, and the tribesmen of other nations, the Christians and so on and so forth, are gathered too. And Imam Sajjad and the women folk of the Ahlul Bayt are forced to stand there. They're being ignored completely. This immense level of apparent humiliation is being given to the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. And over there, Imam Sajjad, even in that situation, overtakes the situation. It gets to the point where one of the Mal'oons looks at one of the daughters of Imam Hussein and looks at this small child and says, I need a servant girl for myself. And he asks Yazid that, could you give me this slave captive as one of my servant ladies? Over there, Imam Sajjad and Sayyidah Zainab speak out. That by Allah, the family of the Holy Prophet was not made to be slave and servants. In the situation where Shaitan tried to give his utmost control over the minds of the people, the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, our role models, flipped the equation entirely. And the followers of Ahlul Bayt to this day do that. The very atrocities that the oppressor is doing to the people of Gaza and to the people of Lebanon, and have recently attacked the people of Iran, that very atrocity in of itself is used by the mu'mineen to display to the world that the corrupt and filthy reality of the oppressor is exactly what they should see. May Allah curse the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam then and now and in the future. Matam Hussein. Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.